Hello and welcome to Ukraine Today. I'm Vladimir Solohub. Join me now to discuss Ukraine-Spanish relations is the Spanish Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, Mr. Ignacio Ybanez Rubio. Mr. Secretary of State, welcome to Ukraine Today.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Secretary of State, in the past months and weeks, Ukrainian Parliament, Ukrainian MPs have been under a lot of pressure, under a lot of scrutiny. There is pressure from Ukrainian people, there is pressure from the Western partners of Ukraine, in particular to adopt all the necessary laws which the EU is requiring to grant Ukraine the visa-free regime. And just recently there was Ukrainian Week in the European Parliament. I understand during your trip, you're also meeting with some of the MPs. So can you tell us what are you talking to the MPs about?
Well, the object of the visit it's much more to express the solidarity of Spain, of the Spanish people to Ukraine. We know the difficult situation that the country is facing, and also what we have really seen in the last years, the efforts of Ukraine to reform its own economy, but also its political life. And what we want to be, I mean, being a friend of Ukraine, is to be close to the Ukrainian people, first of all. Close, of course, to the government of Ukraine and to the political institutions of Ukraine, and trying to insist on the fact that the reform process in which they have been engaging is positive for Ukraine. Of course, that is the main reason of why you want to reform. And second, also, we think that the reforms are also good for the relation between Ukraine and Europe. All the reforms which are being applied and the reforms which are in the program of the application are really going to have a more strong relation between EU and Ukraine, and it's something which, looking from Spain, we value it very positively.
Talking about the reforms, a lot of Ukrainians, as well as, again, I will mention Ukraine's Western partners, are complaining that the reforms process is going way too slow. Everybody is expecting Ukrainian government to do more and to do quicker. Is this the same feeling of Spain?
Well, I think it's good that this feeling is among the population. We think when a country decides to go in this program of reforms, you need to have really the request from the population. It's not something that the government can do by itself. The government needs to have the support of the people. So I think this idea of urgency in the reforms is a positive element. We think in all the countries which have been suffering the kind of transformation that your country is doing, you need this push for reform. We agree with this idea that there is the need to push for that. We think that the message which is passed to the Parliament, but also to the government, is that we need to make all these reform as soon as possible. But I think also from the countries which consider themselves as friends of Ukraine, we also have to say that the reform are difficult. It's not something that you decide from one day to the other. You need to apply a lot of things. You need to have an understanding between the different political forces. So also what we need to pass the message to the Ukrainian people, first of all, but also to the institution, that this process is going to take some time. It's not something that you change from one day to the other. It takes time, and I think what is important is the international community, but very particularly the European Union. What we want is to be in all this process as close as possible to the Ukrainian people, trying to support this effort, which we are convinced is going to be for the benefit of the population themselves, so that this is very important.
But the Ukrainian government has had more than 2 years. It's been more than 2 years after the end of the Euromaidan revolution, when the people went out the streets requesting these changes, these drastic changes, and the new government which came to power, the government was promising these drastic changes, and very few of them did take place. So during your visit, when you were meeting with the Ukrainian government officials, will you be conveying this same message, that the urgency of this reform and the need to expedite?
Of course, yes, but with the other message also, the one of the solidarity. I think you cannot come here to Kiev only asking things to be that the government has to do things. Of course, they have to do, and I think they are committed to do. But also, it's very important what you do at the same time to support this effort. And I think this is some of the ideas that the EU has put forward. We have this free trade agreement, which is going to give good opportunities for Ukraine. We have the process of the visa liberalization liberalization, which is moving ahead. It has to, the Ukrainian government has to comply with some of the rules, but we know that the objective is this visa liberalization. So I think we have to bring the two messages. One message is, of course, is to request more efforts on the reforms, and we are, of course, on this line like all the other EU countries, but also the idea that on this process, the Ukrainian government, the society in Ukraine needs to have the support, the international support, and we are here also to pass this message of support.
How do the Spanish people feel about the visa liberalization with Ukraine? Because a lot of people in Europe, especially now in light of the huge migrant crisis, feel that EU is making a mistake by bringing closer ties with Ukraine, because EU is bringing yet another problem to its home. What about the Spanish people? What is the feeling of the Spanish people?
The Spanish people and the Spanish government, we are very positive to the visa liberalization. We always have thought, and it's also our own experience, the experience of the Spanish transition to democracy, is that the more you allow for people-to-people contact, the better for this process are. So for us, it's very important that you have this objective, which is a very clear objective that the people can look to that. They say, we are going to do reforms. The reforms are always painful and difficult, but you have an objective. The objective, of course, is to have a more closer relation with Europe, and this closer relation, one of the very good examples is the possibility of traveling without a visa. So we are very positive to that. Of course, we have always said that there is a process in which there are conditions, and the EU has established very clearly to the government of Ukraine that before we reach this stage, there are conditions which have to be met. Some of them, from the legal point of view, they have been approved quite recently in your country. There are other stages we have to be comply, but our message, there's a message from Spain, I think the message from Europe is, if Ukraine complies with the action program on the visa liberalization, at the end of the day we will get this visa liberalization. We are positive on that. We are a very open society in Spain. We are an open economy also, and we think that the possibility of giving to the people the possibility to travel from one country to the other is positive. We are receiving a lot of tourists also from Ukraine, and we think that is positive because the people of Ukraine has the possibility to go to a European country, member of the EU like Spain, to see how things are done in our country, and this is also an incentive for all the reforms that I said are more than needed in your country.
Mr. Secretary of State, on January the 1st, the deep and comprehensive free trade area between Ukraine and EU has come into force. Even though it has been just a little bit more than 2 months, do you see any positive feedback from the Spanish businesses for getting the better access to the Ukrainian market, and vice versa for the Ukrainian businesses to getting better access to the Spanish markets?
Yeah. I think the legal framework is there. I mean, the agreement is very positive from this point of view. That's why we have been very supportive of that, and we were one of the first countries to approve and to comply with all the requirements for the entry into force of this agreement. But it's only the legal basis. These you have to complement with the reality of the things, and we are in this process. And I think if you look at the figures for the moment, the presence of the Spanish companies here in Ukraine is very limited. We have a lot of potential to develop, and this is also one of the reasons of my visit, is to come here to have the possibility to speak with the Ukrainian authorities to see in which areas we think that they have most possibilities. For us, we are a country in which we have very good companies on everything which is infrastructure, let's say transport, but also in other area, energy and that. And for this reason, we think that the potential is good. We have many things to do, and I think is also part of the reform which are going to be accomplished by your country. If this is if we follow the idea, the potential is there, but we need to work on that.
But at the same time, because of the sanctions implied by EU towards Russia and vice versa, just recently, Russian Prime Minister Medvedev said that these sanctions are hitting European countries more than they are hitting Russia. Does Spain feel that the sanctions which were mutually applied by Russia and EU is hurting the Spanish economy?
Well, the sanction applied by the EU. I mean, first of all, we have to think about what sanctions are for, because the sanctions, they are not an objective by themselves. The sanctions are always when you think, and the EU thinks that you need to make the other part, in this case Russia, to change their behavior. So for us, we had different kind of sanctions. First of all, we applied some sanctions because of the illegal annexation of Crimea, and after we have other set of sanctions which are applied because of the behavior also of Russia in the eastern part of Ukraine. We think that the sanctions are needed because we see that there is not, for the moment, there is not a change of behavior of Russia. We think that the way to go for us is very clearly the Minsk agreement. We have a commitment by Russia, but also, of course, by Ukraine and by the European Union to support this effort on that. If Minsk is fully applied, at the end we can go to the objective of the lifting of the sanctions. So the sanctions
But
have
what
not
about
to be
this
considered.
negative impact on the Spanish economy?
Well,
Do they have indeed?
The one applied by the EU, as our economic relation with Russia is not the same like other EU countries, the first effects of these sanctions, the one applied by EU, has not been very strong. What has been very strong and very negative for the Spanish economy has been the countermeasures taken by Russia, because they have chosen mainly one of the sector, which is the agriculture sector. In this case, our export to Russia were important. Of course, it is affecting, so it's clear when you put sanctions, you know it's going to be effective. But for us, the more important element of the sanction is not the effect which is going to have on the economy, is much more the effect which is have on the objective we are looking for. The objective for us is that Russia will change. We have had another example quite recently in applying a sanction, which is the case of Iran. The European Union decided, thought that the behavior of Iran regarding their military program was very negative, so we decided to put some sanctions. This, of course, had an effect on our economy, but we thought that the more important message we had to pass to the Iranian, it was to change their behavior. We have been successful. Iran has changed its behavior. Today we have an agreement that we are going to be comply by all the parties, and we are not going to have this military program from Iran, so the sanctions have proved to be useful. If we apply the same situation to the case of Russia, our objective is the same. We know that the sanction is painful. It's painful for the two economies, but we think that the more important objective is the change of behavior of Russia. So if Russia wants to have the sanction lifted, as all of us we want, what they need to do is to change their behavior. If they change their behavior, they comply with Minsk, all of us, and Spain among all these European countries, will be more than ready to lift the sanctions. But the first condition is that Russia change their behavior.
Mr. Secretary, my final question. Both Ukraine and Spain are now non-permanent members of the Security Council. Do you expect close cooperation in this respect between the two countries, in particular on the question, a very sensitive question of the MH17 tribunal?
We are first of all, we have been very much supported by Ukraine when we were candidates to be members of the Security Council. As you can remember, in the case of Spain, we had the 3 candidates for 2 seats, so it was very important to have the support of Ukraine. We are very grateful for this support. And as soon as we got the membership of the Security Council, which was 1 year ago, because we are already there from 2015, the cooperation between Ukraine and Spain has very much reinforced. We knew that Ukraine was going to be candidate in the last election. Now they are members of the Security Council, and we are working very closely. We are even neighbors in the Security Council. We are sitting together, Spain and Ukraine. So we don't have the geographical neighborhood, but in the Security Council we are. We are working very closely. We are working very closely, and I must say that something also I have had the chance to discuss today with Minister Klimkin, but also with the Vice Minister. I had the possibility to work on that. There are many issues. It's very important that the members of the Security Council, especially the non-permanent members of the Security Council, take the opportunity of being in the Security Council to have a discussion about all the main subjects which are in front of the Security Council, which today are many, so the agenda is full of questions. But of course, in the questions that are important for Ukraine, we are going to be very sensitive to their position. We have been last year when Ukraine was not there. We are going to be this year that Ukraine is there, and we hope also to keep this cooperation next year, that in this case will be Ukraine will be there, we will not be there. there anymore because our membership is only for 2 years.
What is your position on the establishment of the MH17 tribunal?
Well, we have been like all the EU. We think that is an investigation which has to be followed. We have been very supportive. We think that it was really a very delicate issue, which we have of course condemned from the very beginning. We are very supportive of the idea. We have been working very much also with the Netherlands. We have been strong supporters of this idea. We have been all the time on their side, like all the EU has been, and of course for us is an important issue, and we will see. But we have also to take into account the situation that we have in the Security Council. The Ukraine and Spain, we are non-permanent members, so we do not have the right of veto. There are other members who are in the Security Council who have this right of veto, so there are limitations in what we can do in the Security Council.
Yes, delicate situation here indeed, Mr. Secretary of State. Many thanks for finding the time to come and talk to us. We were talking about Ukraine-Spanish relations with the Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs of Spain, Mr. Ignacio Ybanez Rubio. I'm Vladimir Solhub. Thank you for watching Ukraine Today.